The whistle of a bullet past her ear was the first indication that Nora Oliver wasn't welcome in Lead, South Dakota. She ducked behind her wagon, heart pounding against her ribs as the dust settled around her. It wasn't the first time she'd been greeted with gunfire, but she had hoped foolishly, perhaps, that this mining town tucked in the Black Hills might be different. The year was 1877, and the gold rush that had flooded the hills with fortune seekers was beginning to stabilize. Lead was transforming from a wild mining camp to something resembling a proper town, though proper was a generous description for a place where justice still came primarily from the barrel of a gun. "That's far enough, Miss Oliver." The voice that rang out belonged to Sheriff Wilkins, a man whose telegrams had reached as far as Denver with warnings about the woman who called herself Nora. Nora straightened her back, brushed the dust from her simple blue dress, and stepped out from behind the wagon with her hands raised slightly. "I've come to claim my brother's property, Sheriff. I have the deed right here." Her voice remained steady despite the tremor in her hands. The sheriff approached cautiously, his deputies flanking him with rifles at the ready. The main street had cleared quickly at the sound of gunfire, but faces peered out from behind curtains and around doorways, hungry for the drama unfolding. "Your brother's dead and his claim died with him," Wilkins spat. "We don't want your kind here." "My kind?" Nora's green eyes flashed dangerously. "And what kind would that be exactly? Don't play coy. Word travels fast. The woman who ran with the Blackwater gang, the outlaw's whore." Nora flinched as if she'd been slapped. "That was a long time ago." "Not long enough," the sheriff replied. "You've got until sundown to clear out." As the sheriff and his men walked away, Nora leaned against her wagon, exhaustion settling into her bones. 5 years she'd been trying to outrun her past, 5 years of moving from town to town, whenever someone recognized her name or face. She was 26 now, and the youthful folly that had led her into Jesse Blackwater's arms at 18 seemed a lifetime ago. "You shouldn't listen to him." The deep voice startled her. Nora whirled around, reaching for the small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. A tall man stood several paces away, leaning casually against the hitching post. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but she could make out a strong jawline shadowed with stubble. "And who might you be?" she asked warily. "Grant O'Malley." He touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "I knew your brother." Nora's hand remained near her hidden weapon. "Everyone claims to know my brother now that he's dead and can't contradict them." A smile quirked the corner of Grant's mouth. "Thomas liked his coffee with honey instead of sugar, said it reminded him of your mother's cooking. He couldn't abide the smell of lilacs because they grew outside the window where your father died. And he carried a gold pocket watch that played Greensleeves when opened." Tears pricked at Nora's eyes. Those were details only someone who truly knew Thomas would know. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, voice soft with suspicion. "Because Thomas was a good man who talked about his sister with nothing but love in his voice," Grant replied simply. "And because I don't believe a person should be judged solely by their worst mistakes." Before Nora could respond, Grant pushed away from the hitching post. "The sheriff may have given you until sundown, but his deputy Lawson won't wait that long. He's been looking to make a name for himself." He nodded toward a side street. "My ranch is about 5 miles north of town. Follow the creek past the lightning-struck oak. I've got a cabin on the property your brother was helping me fix up. It's yours if you want it." With that, he mounted his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, and rode away, leaving Nora staring after him in confusion and the first faint stirrings of hope. True to Grant's warning, Deputy Lawson appeared less than an hour later with several rough-looking men. Nora had already hitched her team and was heading out of town, her meager possessions packed hastily in the wagon. She could feel their eyes on her back as she drove, but no shots followed her this time. The lightning-struck oak wasn't hard to find. Its splintered trunk stood out starkly against the rolling landscape. Nora followed the creek as instructed, her mind whirling with questions about the mysterious Grant O'Malley and his connection to her brother. The cabin appeared as the sun began its descent, nestled in a small clearing with the Black Hills rising majestically behind it. It was modest but sturdy, with a small porch and a newly shingled roof. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was waiting. As Nora drew the wagon to a stop, the cabin door opened and Grant emerged. He'd removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with eyes the color of the Dakota sky. "You came," he said simply, as if he hadn't been entirely sure she would. "I didn't have many options," Nora replied, climbing down from the wagon. Grant nodded toward the cabin. "It's not much, but it's solid. The winter won't touch you in there." "Why are you doing this?" Nora asked again, unable to comprehend the kindness of a stranger in a world that had shown her so little mercy. "Your brother saved my life during a mine collapse last winter," Grant said. "We became friends after that. He was working for me, helping to expand the ranch. This cabin was meant to be his own place eventually." A shadow crossed his face. The fever took him before he could see it finished. Nora felt the familiar ache of grief. Thomas had been her only family, and though they'd been separated by her choices and the consequences that followed, she had never stopped loving him. "I'm not staying in Lead permanently," she said after a moment. "Just long enough to settle Thomas's affairs and sell his claim." "That might be harder than you think," Grant replied. "The mining company's been trying to buy up all the independent claims. They're not above using intimidation." "Is that what happened to Thomas?" Nora asked sharply. "Was it really fever, or did someone help him along to his grave?" Grant's expression darkened. "I've wondered the same. The doctor called it typhoid, but Thomas was healthy as a horse one day and burning with fever the next. The implication hung in the air between them." "The cabin is yours for as long as you need it," Grant continued after a moment. "My main house is about half a mile that way." He pointed through the trees. "I'll leave you to get settled." As Grant walked away, Nora called after him, "Why aren't you afraid of my reputation? Everyone else seems to be." Grant paused and looked back at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "I've found that reputations rarely tell the whole story, Miss Oliver, and I prefer to make my own judgments." With that, he disappeared into the gathering dusk, leaving Nora alone with a sanctuary she hadn't expected and a mystery she was determined to solve. The following days established a cautious routine. Nora spent her mornings in the cabin, making it habitable with the sparse belongings she'd brought, and the supplies Grant occasionally left on her porch, never intruding, always respecting her privacy. In the afternoons, she rode into Lead to visit the assayer's office and the county clerk, gathering information about Thomas's claim and his final days. The town's reception remained frosty. Women clutched their children closer when she passed, and men either leered openly or crossed to the other side of the street. Only the blacksmith, an elderly man named Elijah who had also known Thomas, treated her with any kindness. "Your brother was onto something big before he died," Elijah told her one afternoon as he repaired her wagon wheel. He'd found a new vein in his claim, rich ore from what he described. He was excited but cautious, said he didn't trust the mining company's men. "Did he tell anyone else about this vein?" Nora asked. "Just Grant, as far as I know. Those two were thick as thieves." Elijah paused, studying her face. You know, you don't much look like the hardened criminal they make you out to be. Nora smiled wryly. And what does a hardened criminal look like, Mr. Elijah? Not like a slip of a woman with sad eyes, he replied. Whatever you did or didn't do with that Blackwater fellow, it's in the past. Folks around here would do well to remember that we've all got things we're not proud of. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Thank you, she managed, blinking back tears. That O'Malley's a good man, Elijah continued, hammering at the wheel rim. Been through his own trials, lost his wife and child to the winter fever 3 years back. Threw himself into building that ranch of his afterward. The information about Grant's loss resonated with Nora. Perhaps that explained his compassion. He understood what it meant to be shaped by grief. As October deepened toward November, Nora found herself looking forward to the brief interactions with Grant. Sometimes he would ride by the cabin to check on her, or they would meet on the trail as she returned from town. His quiet strength and undemanding presence were a balm to her wounded spirit. One evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, a knock came at her door. Grant stood on the porch, snowflakes melting in his hair, a bundle in his arms. "I brought you some venison," he said, "and more firewood for your stockpile. The first snow is often followed by the first real cold. Would you like to come in?" Nora found herself asking, surprising them both. Grant hesitated only briefly before nodding. The cabin was warm, the fire casting a golden glow over the simple furnishings Nora had arranged with care. "You've made it homey," Grant observed, setting the venison on the table. "It helps to have a proper place to belong, even temporarily," Nora replied, pouring coffee for them both. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the snow through the window. "I found Thomas's journal today," Nora said finally, "hidden in a false bottom of his trunk. He wrote about the new vein he discovered, and about his suspicions that someone from the Dakota mining company was having independent miners attacked." Grant's expression grew serious. "That matches what he told me before he died. He believed there was a conspiracy between certain town officials and the mining company. He was gathering evidence. Evidence that might have gotten him killed," Nora said grimly. "It's possible," Grant agreed. "Which means you could be in danger, too, if they think he shared his knowledge with you." "I'm used to danger," Nora replied with a bitter smile. "It's been my companion since I was 18. Grant studied her face across the table. "May I ask what really happened with the Blackwater gang?" "The stories I've heard seem embellished." Nora stiffened, then slowly relaxed. If anyone deserved the truth, it was this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. "I was young and foolish," she began quietly. "My parents had died and Thomas was working in the Colorado mines. I was staying with an aunt who saw me as little more than free labor. Jesse Blackwater came through town, charming and full of promises about a better life." She stared into her coffee cup. "I believed him, ran away with him. By the time I realized what kind of man he truly was, I was already known as part of his gang, though I never participated in their robberies." "What happened?" Grant prompted gently when she fell silent. "There was a bank robbery in Laramie. It went wrong, people died. I wasn't there, but it didn't matter. Jesse abandoned me at a hotel when the posse got close. I was arrested, but the judge believed me when I said I hadn't been involved in the robbery. Still, the taint remained. Jesse was eventually caught and hanged, but by then my reputation was ruined." She looked up at Grant. "I've spent 5 years trying to rebuild my life, moving whenever someone recognized me. Thomas was the only family I had left who would still claim me." Grant's eyes held no judgment, only a deep understanding that made Nora's heart ache. "The past has a way of following us," he said quietly, "but it doesn't have to define us. Before Nora could respond, a sound outside caught their attention: horses approaching through the snow. Grant was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. "It's Lawson and some of his men," he said, voice low. "Stay inside." He stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Through the window, Nora watched as Grant stood calmly facing the 5 mounted men, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. "Evening, Lawson," Grant's voice carried through the thin walls. "What brings you out in the snow?" "We've come for the Oliver woman," Lawson replied. "Sheriff's decided she's a danger to the community. Got a telegram from Denver confirming she ran with Blackwater." "She's under my protection," Grant said simply. "And she's done nothing wrong. Last I checked, we don't arrest people in Dakota territory for their past associations." Lawson sneered. "Since when do you care about an outlaw's whore, O'Malley, unless you're enjoying her favors yourself?" Grant moved so quickly that Nora barely saw. At one moment he was standing still. The next his gun was drawn and pointed at Lawson's chest. "You'll watch your tongue when speaking about Miss Oliver, or you'll lose it." The deputy paled, his hand frozen halfway to his own weapon. "Now," Grant continued, his voice deadly calm, "you're trespassing on my property. I suggest you leave before I forget my manners." The standoff stretched for several tense heartbeats before Lawson finally backed down. "This isn't over, O'Malley. The sheriff won't be happy." "The sheriff doesn't run Dakota territory," Grant replied evenly. "And neither does the mining company that lines his pockets." The accusation hung in the frigid air. Lawson's face contorted with anger, but he turned his horse away. "Let's go, boys. We'll deal with this another time." As the riders disappeared into the snowy darkness, Grant holstered his weapon and returned to the cabin. Nora stood just inside the door, her face pale. "They'll be back," she said. "And with more men next time." "Probably," Grant agreed, brushing snow from his coat. "But not tonight. And tomorrow, we're going to the county seat to file Thomas's claim properly in your name. The mining company may have influence in Lead, but their reach has limits." "Why are you risking so much for me?" Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant looked at her for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "Because I believe in second chances," he said finally. "And because I've spent 3 years alone on this ranch, never expecting to care about anyone again. Then you arrived, and suddenly the future seemed less empty." The simple honesty of his words struck Nora speechless. No man had ever spoken to her with such genuine respect and affection, not even Jesse, whose charm had always concealed calculation. "I should go," Grant said, misinterpreting her silence. "You'll be safe tonight. Lawson's a coward at heart." "Stay," Nora said impulsively, reaching for his hand. "Please, the snow's getting worse and I don't want to be alone tonight." Grant's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of uncertainty. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "I'll take the chair," he said. Nora smiled. "Such a gentleman." "Always," he replied with the hint of a smile. That night, as the snow blanketed the Black Hills in pristine white, Nora lay awake listening to Grant's steady breathing from the chair near the fire. For the first time in years, she felt safe and more dangerous still. She felt hope stirring in her heart. The journey to Deadwood, the larger settlement that served as the county seat, took most of the following day. The snow had stopped, but the cold remained, turning the world into a crystalline landscape that glittered under the winter sun. Grant insisted they take his sturdy buckboard rather than Nora's lighter wagon. "Less likely to get stuck," he explained, "and faster if we need to make a quick exit." The precaution proved wise when, halfway to Deadwood, they spotted riders on their trail. "Lawson?" Nora asked, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "No," Grant replied grimly. "Mining company men by the look of them. They must have gotten word about what we're planning to do. He urged the horses to a faster pace, the buckboard jolting over the rutted trail. The riders behind them gained ground steadily. "Take the reins," Grant said, passing them to Nora. He reached beneath the seat and produced a Winchester rifle. "Keep us steady." Nora took control of the team with practiced hands. Growing up in Colorado had taught her to drive a wagon before she could properly write her name. The first shot from their pursuers went wide, splintering a tree trunk beside the trail. Grant turned and fired back, not aiming to kill but to discourage. One of the riders yelled as a bullet grazed his arm. "There's a fork in the trail ahead," Grant called over the thunder of hooves and wheels. "Take the right branch, it's rougher but leads through a narrow pass. Their horses won't be able to run alongside us there." Nora nodded, concentrating on guiding the team through the increasingly difficult terrain. The right fork indeed proved treacherous, barely wide enough for the buckboard, with steep slopes rising on either side. Behind them, their pursuers were forced to ride single file, making them more difficult targets but also limiting their ability to attack. Grant's accurate shooting kept them at bay until the pass finally opened onto a wider trail. "We're almost to Deadwood," Grant said, lowering his rifle. "They won't try anything in town, too many witnesses." He was right. As the settlement came into view, their pursuers fell back, eventually disappearing among the hills. Deadwood in 1877 was a booming, chaotic town. Its main street crowded with saloons, hotels, and businesses catering to the flood of gold seekers. Despite its rough reputation, it had more robust legal structures than Lead, including a proper courthouse where mining claims were registered. The clerk who received Thomas's documentation gave no indication that he recognized Nora's name. Treating her with the same bureaucratic indifference he showed all claimants. By mid-afternoon, Thomas's claim was officially transferred to Nora's name, with the new vein he had discovered properly documented. "That should make it harder for the mining company to simply seize it," Grant said as they left the courthouse. "Not impossible, but harder." "I still don't understand why they're so determined," Nora said. "There are dozens of claims in the Black Hills. Why focus so intently on Thomas's?" "Based on his notes, I think he found more than just gold," Grant replied. "The samples he showed me had traces of other minerals, rare ones that might be even more valuable. The mining company's geologist must have realized the same thing." They spent the night in Deadwood, taking rooms at a reputable hotel under assumed names. Grant insisted on adjoining rooms with a connecting door left unlocked for safety, he explained, though the warmth in his eyes suggested other considerations might be at play. That night, Nora found herself standing in the doorway between their rooms, watching as Grant cleaned his revolver by lamplight. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Grant looked up, his hands stilling on the weapon. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." Nora moved into his room, sitting on the edge of the bed opposite his chair. "Most men would have turned me away the moment they heard my name, or worse, assumed I was available to them because of my past." "I'm not most men," Grant said simply. "No," Nora agreed, a small smile playing at her lips. "You certainly aren't." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of feelings that had been building since their first meeting. Grant set aside his revolver and moved to sit beside her on the bed, his presence solid and reassuring. "Nora," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I need you to know that I don't care about what happened with Blackwater. Who you were then isn't who you are now." "How can you be so sure?" she whispered. "Because I've seen your courage, your determination to honor your brother's memory, your kindness despite the cruelty shown to you." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "The past is written. It's the future that matters now. Nora looked down at their joined hands, feeling the calluses on his palm, evidence of a life of honest work. And what future do you see, Grant O'Malley? One where you don't have to run anymore, he said. One where you can build something lasting, whether it's developing Thomas's claim or... He hesitated, then continued more softly, or perhaps finding a home on a certain ranch with a man who finds himself thinking about you far more often than he should. Nora's heart pounded in her chest. Is that a proposal, Cowboy? The term made Grant smile. He was more rancher than cowboy, but the affection in her voice transformed the word into something intimate. Not yet, he replied. That will come when you're ready, when you're certain of your own feelings, but it is a promise that I'll be waiting when that day comes. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Nora closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and healing wounds. That night, they slept in their separate rooms, but with the connecting door wide open, a symbol of the trust growing between them. The return journey to lead the following day was tense but uneventful. No pursuers appeared on the trail, which Grant found more concerning than reassuring. They're planning something, he said as they approached his ranch. The mining company and the sheriff won't give up so easily. His prediction proved accurate. As they crested the final hill overlooking the ranch, black smoke filled the sky ahead. No, Grant breathed, urging the team to a gallop. They arrived to find Nora's cabin engulfed in flames, too far gone to save. Grant's ranch house further away had been spared, but the message was clear. This is just the beginning, Nora said, watching the cabin burn with a strange calm. They'll keep coming after us. Then we'll be ready, Grant replied, his jaw set in determination. This is my land and you have legal claim to Thomas's property now. They can't simply drive us away. Over the following weeks, the conflict escalated. Sheriff Wilkins publicly denounced Nora as an outlaw and threatened to arrest her if she entered lead. Anonymous threats were left at Grant's property line. Twice, Grant exchanged gunfire with trespassers in the night, but they also found allies. Elijah the blacksmith rallied several independent miners who resented the mining company's growing monopoly. The editor of the Deadwood Pioneer, sensing a story that could boost his paper's circulation, began investigating the connections between the Dakota Mining Company and corrupt officials. Through it all, Nora and Grant grew closer, their affection deepening into love that was all the more powerful for being built on mutual respect and shared struggle. Nora moved into Grant's house, initially taking a spare bedroom but eventually sharing his, their relationship evolving naturally despite the chaos around them. I love you, Grant told her one night as they lay together, the winter wind howling outside. I think I have since that first day when you stood up to Wilkins with your head held high. Nora traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. And I love you, my steadfast cowboy. You saw me when everyone else only saw my mistakes. The turning point came in late December, when one of Thomas's fellow miners came forward with evidence that Thomas had been poisoned not by typhoid, but by arsenic slipped into his coffee by a mining company representative. The witness had been afraid to speak up until the Deadwood Pioneer's investigation brought other similar cases to light. With the evidence mounting, the territorial marshal finally intervened. Sheriff Wilkins was removed from office pending investigation. Several mining company executives were arrested. The independent miners, led by Elijah and supported by Grant's testimony, formed an association to protect their rights against corporate overreach. As for Thomas's claim, the new vein proved even richer than anticipated. Nora used the profits to invest in Grant's ranch, expanding it into one of the most prosperous in the territory. Together, they built a new house on the property larger than the original, with wide windows that looked out over the Black Hills and enough bedrooms for the family they both hoped to create. On a spring evening in 1878, as the hills burst into the vibrant green of new growth, Grant led Nora to a hilltop overlooking their land. A small table had been set up, with candles and a bottle of champagne, a luxury he had shipped all the way from Chicago. "What's all this?" Nora asked, laughing as Grant held her chair. "A celebration," he replied, uncorking the champagne with practiced ease. "Of new beginnings." After pouring 2 glasses, Grant reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Inside nestled a gold ring set with a modest but perfect diamond. "I had this made from gold taken from Thomas's claim," he said softly. "I thought he would approve." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "He would have loved you like a brother." Grant took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Nora Oliver, when you came to lead, I was existing, not living. The loss of my wife and son had left me hollow. I never expected to feel whole again." He squeezed her fingers gently. "You changed that. You showed me that the heart can heal, that love can return even after great loss." He slid from his chair to one knee, still holding her hand. "I promised you once that I didn't care about your past, that I only cared about our future. That remains true today. Will you marry me, Nora? Will you build that future with me?" "Yes," Nora whispered, tears streaming freely now. 1,000 times yes. They were married in the summer, beneath an arbor built where Nora's cabin had once stood, a deliberate choice that symbolized how destruction could lead to renewal. Half the town attended, many of the same people who had once shunned Nora, now genuinely happy for the couple who had helped expose corruption and bring positive change to the community. Elijah, now serving as Leeds interim sheriff, gave the bride away. "Your brother would be bursting with pride," he told Nora as they walked toward the arbor where Grant waited. "And so would your parents." "I know," Nora replied, her eyes fixed on Grant's face. "They're here with us today in their own way." As they exchanged vows, Grant's voice rang clear across the gathering. "I take you, Nora, not despite your past, but including it every triumph and trial that shaped you into the woman I love. Our story begins today, but it carries the echoes of all that came before." Nora's response was equally heartfelt. "I take you, Grant, my protector, my partner, my love. You taught me that redemption isn't just possible, it's inevitable when you find someone who sees your true self." In the years that followed, their ranch prospered, eventually becoming known as the O'Malley Homestead. Nora gave birth to their first child in 1879, a son they named Thomas, after her brother. A daughter, Grace, followed 2 years later with another son, Joseph, completing their family in 1883. The mining company's corruption was fully exposed, leading to reforms that benefited independent miners throughout the territory. Nora used a portion of her brother's claimed profits to establish a fund for miners' widows and children, ensuring that others wouldn't face the desperation that had once led her into Jesse Blackwater's orbit. On their 10th anniversary, as they watched their children playing in the summer twilight, Grant wrapped his arms around Nora from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Nora turned in his embrace to face him, noting the silver now threading through his dark hair, the laugh lines deepening around his eyes. She thought of the difficult journey that had brought her to Lead, of the pain and rejection she had faced, and of the love that had ultimately redeemed it all. "Not one," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "Every step led me here to you, to our future." Grant smiled, the same smile that had first given her hope on that dusty street in Leeds so many years ago. "And what a beautiful future it is." As the Black Hills darkened around them and stars appeared overhead, they remained on the porch, speaking softly of memories and dreams, their entwined hands a testament to the enduring power of second chances and the healing magic of love that sees beyond the past.